Jake Morrison stood by the large window of Harmony Station and looked out at the stars. His hands were shaking a little, though he tried to hide it. In all his 32 years, he had never felt this nervous. Not during combat missions, not during his promotion ceremony, not even when he first left Earth. But today was different. Today, humans would meet aliens for the first time. The space station floated in the darkness between Earth and the Viridian Empire's territory. It had taken 6 months to build this place after the first radio signals were exchanged. 6 months of planning, building, and waiting. Now the moment had finally arrived. Jake could see Earth in the distance, a small blue dot that held everything he loved. His family was down there. His friends, his memories. He wondered what they were thinking right now. Were they excited? Scared? Both? Behind him, Commander Lisa Hayes was giving final instructions to the diplomatic team. Her voice was calm and steady, the way it always was. She had been doing this kind of work for 20 years. If anyone could handle first contact, it was her. Remember, Hayes said, we know very little about their culture. Watch everything they do. Listen to everything they say. And for the love of all that's good, don't touch anything without permission. We're representing all of humanity here. Every action matters. Jake turned away from the window and joined the group. There were 12 humans in total. Military officers, scientists, diplomats. Each person had been chosen carefully for this mission. Jake was there because of his record in difficult situations. He could think fast and stay calm under pressure. At least that's what his file said. Dr. Alan Carter, the team's chief scientist, was fidgeting with his tablet. He looked more nervous than Jake felt. Their ship is approaching, Carter said. It's massive, much bigger than our largest vessels. The technology readings are off the charts. Size isn't everything, said Captain Danny Brooks, Jake's best friend since training days. Danny always tried to lighten the mood. Maybe they just like big ships. You know, compensation. A few people chuckled, but the laughter was nervous. Hayes shot Danny a look that said not now, and he went quiet. Jake appreciated his friend's attempt to ease the tension, but this wasn't the time for jokes. The communication system beeped. A voice came through, speaking English with a strange accent. It was the translation software working in real time. This is the Viridian diplomatic vessel. We are ready to dock. Please prepare to receive our delegation. Hayes took a deep breath and responded. This is Commander Lisa Hayes of Earth. Welcome to Harmony Station. We are honored to meet you. The next 30 minutes felt like hours. The human team moved to the main meeting hall, a large room with seats arranged in a circle. The design was meant to show equality. No one side was more important than the other. At least that was the plan. The doors opened with a soft hiss. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The Viridians were here. They were tall, taller than most humans. They wore armor that looked both beautiful and functional, colored in deep blues and silvers. But what struck Jake most was their helmets. Each Viridian's face was completely covered by an ornate metal headgear. He couldn't see their faces at all. Dr. Carter had briefed them on this. The Viridians considered face covering important in public settings. It was part of their culture, something sacred. Removing your helmet in front of strangers was considered extremely intimate, something done only with family or the closest friends. The lead Viridian stepped forward. His voice came through clearly, translated into English. I am High Chancellor Vex of the Viridian Empire. We come in the interest of mutual understanding. The words sounded diplomatic, but Jake noticed something in the tone. It wasn't exactly friendly. More like cautious, suspicious. He couldn't quite tell. Hayes stepped forward and introduced the human delegation. She spoke about Earth's hopes for peace and cooperation. She talked about shared knowledge and mutual benefit. Her words were careful and practiced. High Chancellor Vex listened, then began speaking about the Viridian Empire. As he talked, Jake realized something unsettling. Every sentence seemed to include a subtle criticism of humanity. Vex mentioned humanity's unfortunate tendency toward conflict. He noted Earth's primitive but improving technology. He spoke of humanity's emotional nature as if it were a weakness. Jake felt his jaw tighten. He wanted to say something, to defend his species, but he knew better. This was Hayes' show. He was just here to observe and support. The formal meeting continued for what felt like forever. Both sides discussed possible areas of cooperation, trade, technology exchange, cultural programs. But everything felt stiff and uncomfortable. It was like watching two people try to dance when neither knew the steps. Finally, Hayes called for a break. The Viridians moved to one side of the room, the humans to the other. Jake felt exhausted and they'd barely started. Well, that went great, Danny whispered sarcastically. I especially loved the part where he basically called us violent monkeys. Quiet, Hayes said, but she looked frustrated too. This is going to be harder than we thought. Jake needed some air, or at least what passed for air in a space station. He excused himself and walked to one of the observation areas. It was a smaller room with windows looking out at the stars. He thought he'd be alone, but he wasn't. One of the Viridians stood by the window looking out at Earth. Unlike the others, this one's posture seemed different, less formal, more curious. Jake hesitated, then decided to approach. Beautiful, isn't it? Jake said, gesturing to Earth. The Viridian turned quickly, as if surprised to find someone there. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the translation device activated. Yes, your world is very alive. So much water. So much green. The voice was different from Vex's, softer somehow. More genuine. I'm Jake Morrison, he said, offering his hand, then remembering they might not shake hands. He lowered it awkwardly. I am Princess Lyra, the Viridian said. Third heir to the throne. I serve as cultural ambassador. A princess. Jake tried not to show his surprise. It's an honor to meet you, princess. Just Lyra is fine, she said. There was something almost friendly in her tone. Tell me about your world, Jake Morrison. What is it like to live on a planet with so much water? And just like that, they started talking. Really talking.
Not the careful diplomatic speech from the meeting.
Just two people sharing stories about their homes. Jake told her about Earth's oceans, about rain, about how water shaped everything in human life. Lyra told him about her world, which was drier but had beautiful crystal formations that sang in the wind. For a few minutes, Jake forgot about the tension in the meeting hall. He forgot about representing humanity. He was just talking to someone interesting, someone curious, someone who seemed to actually care about what he had to say. I should return to my delegation, Lyra said eventually. But thank you, Jake Morrison. This conversation was more valuable than hours of formal discussion. Call me Jake, just Jake, and maybe we could talk again? He could sense her smile, even though he couldn't see her face. I would like that. As Lyra left, Jake stayed by the window a bit longer. Something had just happened. He wasn't sure what exactly, but it felt important. For the first time since the Viridians arrived, he felt hopeful. Maybe this first contact wouldn't be perfect. Maybe there would be misunderstandings and difficulties. But if one human and one Viridian could have a real conversation, could find common ground, then maybe there was hope for everyone. Jake took one last look at Earth, then headed back to the meeting hall. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake found himself looking for Lyra everywhere. The formal meetings continued, still tense and uncomfortable. High Chancellor Vex seemed determined to find fault with everything human. But whenever there was a break, Jake would slip away to one of the observation areas, hoping to find the Viridian princess there. More often than not, she was waiting. They never planned these meetings officially. They just seemed to happen. Jake would arrive, and Lyra would be there, looking out at the stars. Or Lyra would come, and Jake would already be sitting by the window. Their conversations grew longer and deeper. Jake learned that Lyra had studied human culture for years, ever since the first signals were detected. She had read Earth's literature, listened to music, looked at paintings. She was fascinated by how much emotion humans put into their art. On my world, she explained one day, art is about precision and logic. We create things that are mathematically perfect, but human art is different. It's messy and emotional and raw. At first, I didn't understand it. Now I think maybe that's what makes it beautiful. Jake showed her his favorite poem on his tablet. It was something his mother used to read to him as a child, a simple verse about hope and stars and finding your way home. As Lyra read it, he watched her body language change. She became very still, very focused. This speaks of longing, she said quietly, of being far from home but carrying home in your heart. I understand this feeling. You get homesick too? Jake asked, surprised. He had assumed Viridians were too logical for such emotions. Very much so. We may express it differently than humans, but the feeling is the same. I miss my family. I miss the crystal gardens where I used to walk. I miss the sound of home. In that moment, Jake realized something important. Beneath all the cultural differences, beneath the helmets and formal protocols, the Viridians weren't so different after all. They felt things. They missed home. They got lonely. But not everyone was happy about Jake and Lyra's growing friendship. One evening, Danny pulled Jake aside after a meeting. "You need to be careful," Danny said, his voice low. "People are noticing. Both sides. Hayes asked me to give you a heads up." "We're just talking," Jake protested. "Building bridges, isn't that what we're supposed to do?" "Yeah, but she's a princess, Jake, and Vex already thinks we're trying to manipulate them. If he finds out you're meeting privately with Lyra, he'll use it against us, against all of this." Danny gestured around at the station. "The whole alliance could fall apart." Jake knew his friend was right, but he also knew that his conversations with Lyra mattered. They were achieving something real, something the formal meetings never could. "Understanding, connection, trust, I'll be careful," Jake promised. But he didn't promise to stop. Commander Hayes called him to her office the next day. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Lieutenant Morrison, I'm not going to order you to stop talking to Princess Lyra," she said. "Your conversations might actually be the most productive thing happening on this station. But you need to understand the risk." "I understand, ma'am. Do you?" Hayes leaned forward. "High Chancellor Vex is looking for any excuse to declare these negotiations a failure. He doesn't want an alliance. He thinks humanity is dangerous and unpredictable. If he can paint you as someone who's manipulating the princess, he wins." "But I'm not manipulating anyone," Jake said. "Lyra and I just talk. We share ideas. We're friends." Hayes' expression softened. "I know, and that's probably what scares Vex the most. Real friendship, real connection, that's harder to fight than manipulation. Just be aware that you're being watched. Both of you." Jake left the commander's office feeling troubled. He had never meant to cause problems. He just wanted to understand the Viridians better, to see past the helmets and protocols to the people underneath. That evening, he went to the observation area, but Lyra wasn't there. He waited for an hour, then 2. Nothing. A cold feeling settled in his stomach. Had something happened? Had Vex found out about their meetings? The next day, the Viridian delegation arrived late to the scheduled meeting. High Chancellor Vex looked even more stern than usual. When everyone was seated, he made an announcement. "It has come to my attention that certain members of our delegations have been meeting privately, without proper oversight. This is inappropriate and raises concerns about the integrity of these negotiations." Jake felt every eye in the room turned toward him. His face grew hot, but he kept his expression neutral. He wouldn't give Vex the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. "Princess Lyra has been recalled to our vessel," Vex continued. "She will no longer participate in station activities without direct supervision. This is for her protection and the protection of these negotiations." Commander Hayes stood up. "High Chancellor, I must object. Cultural exchange between our people is the entire point of this station. Limiting that exchange serves no one." "The point of this station," Vex said coldly, "is formal negotiation between our governments, not unauthorized fraternization." The word fraternization hung in the air like an accusation. Jake wanted to stand up, to defend himself and Lyra, but Hayes caught his eye and shook her head slightly. "Not now." The meeting continued, but Jake couldn't focus. All he could think about was Lyra, confined to the Viridian ship, probably being questioned about their conversations. He hoped she was okay. He hoped she didn't regret their friendship. After the meeting ended, Dr. Carter approached Jake in the corridor. The scientist looked excited about something. "I've been researching Viridian cultural records," Carter said quickly. "The ones they shared with us as part of the exchange. And I found something interesting about their face-covering tradition." "What about it?" Jake asked, not really in the mood for a lecture. "Well, everyone knows they cover their faces in public. But in ancient times, there was a tradition called the revelation of trust. And when two peoples formed an alliance, their leaders would remove their helmets in front of each other as a sign of complete trust and vulnerability." "Ancient times," Jake said. "What about now?" "That's the thing. The tradition still exists in their texts, but it hasn't been practiced in over 1,000 years. They've become too formal, too rigid. But the tradition is still there, still valid according to their own cultural laws. Jake thought about this. So if a Viridian were to revive this tradition, it would be legal, acceptable. Technically, yes, though it would be shocking, revolutionary even. It would mean they truly trusted the other party. Before Jake could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Not the emergency evacuation alarm, but the one that meant all personnel should report to their stations immediately. Something was wrong. Jake and Carter ran toward the command center. Other people were running too, humans and Viridians both. The careful separation between the two groups was forgotten in the sudden urgency. When they reached the command center, Commander Hayes was already there, talking rapidly with the station's chief engineer. "What's happening?" Jake asked. Hayes turned to him, and Jake saw something in her face he'd never seen before. Fear. "Critical systems failure in the environmental control section," she said. "If we can't fix it in the next 2 hours, we're looking at catastrophic decompression. Both delegations could be killed." Jake felt his blood run cold. This was exactly what everyone had feared. Not political conflict or cultural misunderstanding, but a simple mechanical failure that could end everything. "What do you need?" he asked. Hayes looked at him, then at the Viridian engineers who had just arrived. "We need everyone working together, human and Viridian. No more politics, no more separation. Just people trying to survive." And just like that, everything changed. 3. Crisis that could have ended first contact might actually be what saved it. The command center became a storm of activity. Humans and Viridians crowded around display screens, shouting numbers and coordinates in 2 different languages. The translation devices worked overtime, sometimes lagging behind the rapid speech. Jake found himself working next to a Viridian engineer. They didn't speak much, just pointed at screens and nodded when they agreed on something. It was strange how quickly the barriers fell away when survival was at stake. The problem was complex. A coolant line had ruptured in the environmental control section. The backup systems weren't responding properly. Without environmental control, the station would lose air pressure. Slowly at first, then faster. Eventually, there wouldn't be enough oxygen to breathe. "We need to manually reset the backup systems," the chief engineer said. "But that section is already partially depressurized. Whoever goes in will need a full pressure suit." "I'll go," Jake said immediately. Danny grabbed his arm. "Jake, no. That's suicide. The corridor is unstable. There's debris floating everywhere. Someone has to do it," Jake said. "I'm trained for spacewalks. I've done this kind of work before." Commander Hayes looked at him for a long moment. Jake could see her weighing the options. Send someone and risk losing them, or do nothing and definitely lose everyone. "Do it," she said finally. "But you take a Viridian engineer with you. Their suits have better shielding. If something goes wrong, they can pull you out." One of the Viridian engineers stepped forward. "I will accompany him." Jake nodded his thanks. They didn't have time for long preparations. Every minute counted. As Jake suited up, he thought about Earth, about his family, about all the things he'd never said to them. He pushed those thoughts away. Fear wouldn't help him now. He needed to focus. The airlock door opened and Jake stepped into the damaged corridor. The Viridian engineer followed. Through his helmet, Jake could see the destruction. Metal panels hung loose. Wires sparked occasionally. And everywhere there was debris floating in the low gravity. They moved carefully, hand over hand along the walls. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He could hear his own breathing inside the helmet, loud and fast. "The control panel is ahead," the Viridian said through the comm system. 30 meters. They pushed forward. Jake dodged a large piece of floating metal. Then another. It was like navigating through a deadly obstacle course. Finally, they reached the control panel. Jake pulled out his tools and got to work. The panel was damaged but not destroyed. He could fix this. He had to fix this. His hands moved quickly, connecting wires, replacing damaged circuits. The Viridian engineer held a light for him and passed him tools when he needed them. They worked in perfect coordination, 2 people from different worlds united by a common goal. "Almost there," Jake said. "Just one more connection and..." A warning alarm sounded in his helmet. Jake looked up just in time to see a large piece of debris coming straight at them. He pushed the Viridian engineer out of the way. The debris hit Jake's shoulder hard, spinning him around. He bounced off the wall, his vision blurring. "Jake," the Viridian's voice came through the comm. "Are you injured?" Jake couldn't answer. His shoulder felt like it was on fire, but the control panel was right there, so close. He reached out with his good hand and made the final connection. The panel lit up green. The backup systems activated. Jake heard cheering through the comm system from the command center. "He did it!" someone shouted. "Pressure is stabilizing!" The Viridian engineer grabbed Jake and started pulling him back toward the airlock. Jake tried to help, but his body wasn't cooperating. Everything hurt. His vision kept going dark around the edges. "Stay with me," the Viridian said. "We're almost there." They made it to the airlock. The door closed behind them. As pressure returned to normal, Jake felt hands removing his helmet. He could hear voices, lots of them, both human and Viridian. Someone was carrying him. He tried to focus, but everything was swimming. He caught glimpses of the medical bay. Bright lights, Dr. Carter's worried face. Danny saying something Jake couldn't quite hear. Then darkness. When Jake opened his eyes again, he didn't know how much time had passed. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. His shoulder was bandaged and hurt less than before. Someone had given him something for the pain. He was in the medical bay. The room was crowded. Commander Hayes was there. Danny, Dr. Carter, several Viridian engineers, and High Chancellor Vex looking less stern than usual. Actually, he almost looked concerned. "He's awake," Dr. Carter said, relief clear in his voice. "How do you feel?" Hayes asked. "Like I got hit by a spaceship," Jake said, his voice rough. Danny laughed, though it sounded shaky. "You saved everyone, you crazy idiot." The door to the medical bay opened. Everyone turned to look. A Viridian entered, and Jake recognized the posture immediately. Lyra. The room went quiet. Lyra walked slowly toward Jake's bed. She didn't look at anyone else, just moved forward with purpose. High Chancellor Vex started to say something, but stopped. Lyra stood beside Jake's bed and looked down at him. Then, in front of everyone, both human and Viridian, she raised her hands to her helmet. Someone gasped. Jake heard it, but couldn't tell who. All he could focus on was Lyra's hands, slowly, carefully removing the ceremonial headgear. The helmet came off. Lyra's face was revealed. She was beautiful. Not human beautiful, Viridian beautiful. Her skin had a soft glow to it like moonlight on water. The patterns Jake had read about were visible now, subtle lines that moved and shifted with her emotions. Her eyes were large, a deep blue that seemed to hold entire galaxies. Her bone structure was elegant, refined, different from human faces, but somehow familiar too. But what made her truly beautiful wasn't the physical features. It was the expression on her face. Worry, relief, trust. Emotions so clear and honest that Jake could read them as easily as words on a page. "Lyra," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, barely audible, but in the silent room everyone heard it. "Jake Morrison," she said, and her voice without the helmet was different, richer somehow, more real. "You risked your life for my people as well as yours. You showed courage and selflessness. You have earned my trust." Jake stared at her, trying to find words. His mind was still foggy from the pain medication, but one word came to him. One simple, honest word that captured everything he felt in that moment. "Beautiful," he whispered. The room erupted. Viridians spoke rapidly to each other in their own language. Humans whispered and stared. High Chancellor Vex looked like he'd been struck by lightning. But Jake and Lyra didn't look away from each other. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not politics. Not protocol. Not the cultural barriers that were supposed to keep them apart. Just two people from different worlds, seeing each other truly for the first time, and finding that the distance between them wasn't as great as everyone had thought. The medical bay cleared slowly. Humans and Viridians filed out, still talking in hushed, excited voices. What had just happened would be talked about for years, maybe centuries. Princess Lyra had broken one of the most sacred traditions of her people, and she had done it in front of everyone. High Chancellor Vex was the last to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at Lyra. She met his gaze steadily, her face still uncovered. Finally, Vex left without saying anything, but Jake saw something in his expression. Anger, respect, maybe both. Commander Hayes approached Jake's bed. "That was quite a moment, Lieutenant." Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow. She glanced at Lyra, nodded respectfully, and left. Danny was the last one out. He gave Jake a look that said, "We're definitely talking about this later," and closed the door behind him. Jake and Lyra were alone. She still stood beside his bed, her helmet held in her hands. "You didn't have to do that," Jake said softly. "Yes, I did," Lyra replied. "When I heard what you had done, risking your life to save both our peoples, I knew. Words would not be enough. Protocol would not be enough. Only the truth would be enough. The truth? That I trust you. That I trust your people. That you have shown me what humanity truly means. It means courage. It means sacrifice. It means seeing others not as aliens, but as people." Jake felt his chest tighten. "Lyra, what will happen to you?" Vex looked angry. She smiled, and Jake realized it was the first time he'd seen her smile. It transformed her face, making her look younger and more hopeful. "Vex is always angry, but he cannot punish me for following our own ancient traditions. I researched them carefully. Dr. Carter was kind enough to share his findings, and I verified them in our historical records. The revelation of trust," Jake said. "Yes, it has not been used in 1,000 years, but it is still valid, still legal, still honored by our laws. When one party saves the life of another, when trust is proven beyond doubt, the revelation can be given. But Vex will still try to use this against us," Jake said. "He will try, but I am not alone in this. Ambassador Kale and others have been working quietly to undermine Vex's position. They believe in this alliance. They see the potential in humanity." Over the next few days, Jake recovered in the medical bay. His shoulder would heal, though it would take time. But the real recovery was happening elsewhere, in meeting rooms and private chambers, as both delegations dealt with what Lyra had done. Danny visited every day, bringing food and news. "It's chaos out there," he said on the third day. "But good chaos, mostly. Half the Viridians think Lyra is a hero. The other half thinks she's crazy. And Vex is losing support fast." "What about our side?" Jake asked. "Oh, you're a legend now. The guy who saved both species and got the alien princess to reveal her face. The media back on Earth is going crazy." "You're on every news channel," Jake groaned. "That's exactly what I didn't want." "Too late now, buddy. You're a symbol of human Viridian cooperation. Hayes says you changed the entire tone of the negotiations." Dr. Carter came by with more interesting news. "Ambassador Kale has been gathering evidence against High Chancellor Vex. Turns out he's been sabotaging the negotiations from the beginning, delaying responses, mistranslating key phrases, even trying to prevent Lyra from meeting with humans." "Can they prove it?" Jake asked. "They have communication records, witness statements, everything." Vex wanted this alliance to fail. He sees humanity as a threat to Viridian supremacy, but he underestimated one thing. What's that? He underestimated his own people's desire for connection. Not all Viridians are like him. Many of them want to understand other species. They want friends, not just subordinates. On the 5th day, something unprecedented happened. A message came through from the Viridian homeworld. The Emperor himself wanted to speak. Commander Hayes gathered both delegations in the main meeting hall. The large screen activated and Emperor Aldrich appeared. Even through the screen, his presence was commanding. He wore formal robes and, like all Viridians in public, his face was covered by an elaborate helmet. "I have been watching these negotiations with great interest," the Emperor said. His voice was deep and measured. "I have seen reports of what happened during the crisis. I have heard about the courage shown by Lieutenant Jake Morrison, and I have learned of my daughter's decision to revive an ancient tradition." Jake felt everyone's eyes on him. He sat up straighter despite the pain in his shoulder. "High Chancellor Vex," the Emperor continued, "you have served the Empire for many years. However, evidence has come to light that you have been working against the goals of this mission. You are hereby recalled to the homeworld. Ambassador Kale will assume leadership of our delegation." Vex stood frozen for a moment, then bowed stiffly and left the room. Jake felt no satisfaction in seeing him go, only relief. "As for my daughter's actions," the Emperor said, and his tone softened slightly, "she has reminded us all of who we once were. A people who valued trust above protocol, who saw honor in vulnerability. I approve of her decision. More than that, I celebrate it." Lyra, who had been standing quietly to one side, looked up at the screen. Jake saw the relief in her expression. "I will be traveling to Harmony Station personally," the Emperor announced. "It is time for the Viridian Empire to show the same courage my daughter has shown. If we are to form an alliance with humanity, Let it be built on truth and trust, not suspicion and formality. The Emperor's image faded. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Ambassador Kale stepped forward. "This is a new beginning," he said, "for both our peoples." High Chancellor Vex represented old fears, old ways of thinking. "But we are not bound by the past. We can choose a different future." Commander Hayes stood. "Then let us choose it together. Not as humans and Viridians, but as allies, as friends." She extended her hand toward Ambassador Kale. The Viridian looked at her hand for a moment, then reached out and grasped it firmly. The room erupted in applause, both species celebrating together. Jake watched from his seat, his shoulders still healing but his heart full. What had started as a tense first contact, what had nearly ended in disaster, had somehow transformed into something beautiful, something hopeful. Lyra made her way through the crowd to him. She still didn't wear her helmet in the station anymore. Other Viridians were starting to follow her example, at least when in private meetings with humans. "You did this," she said quietly. "Your courage started all of this." "No," Jake replied. "We did this. Together. That's what makes it real." She smiled that smile that still took his breath away. "Together," she agreed. "That is a good word for what we are building here." As the celebration continued around them, Jake looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home, and somewhere else was the Viridian homeworld, Lyra's home. Two worlds that had been strangers were becoming friends, and it had all started with one simple moment of honesty. One word whispered in truth, beautiful. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in the observation area where he had first talked with Lyra. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. The station felt different now. Warmer somehow, more alive. Humans and Viridians walked the corridors together, talking and laughing. The formal separation between the two groups had dissolved. It wasn't perfect yet. There were still misunderstandings, still moments of confusion. But there was also friendship. Real, honest friendship. Jake's shoulder had healed well. Dr. Carter said he'd have full mobility back in another month. In the meantime, Jake had been given a new assignment. He was to be one of the first human exchange officers, spending a year on the Viridian homeworld learning their culture and technology. The news had surprised him. Excited him too. A year among the Viridians. A year to really understand them. It was more than he'd ever imagined. Thinking about the future, Lyra's voice came from behind him. Jake turned and smiled. "Always, isn't that what humans do?" "Yes," she said, moving to stand beside him. "Along with dreaming impossible dreams and making them real. Your people are quite remarkable that way." "We learned that from watching you," Jake said. "You took an impossible risk reviving that ancient tradition. You could have lost everything, but I gained everything instead," Lyra replied. "I gained proof that trust can bridge any gap. That honesty can overcome any barrier, and I gained a friend." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the stars. "Today is the big day," Jake said. "Your father arrives. Yes, he is bringing the treaty for signing. Both our worlds will formally become allies." Lyra's voice held pride and excitement. "It is historic. Are you nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted. "My father is a good man, but he is also the Emperor. He carries the weight of our entire civilization. What if I have disappointed him?" Jake touched her arm gently. "You saved this alliance. You showed courage when others showed only fear. Any father would be proud of that. Any emperor should be grateful." "Thank you," Lyra said softly. "Your words give me strength." The announcement came an hour later. The Emperor's ship had arrived. Both delegations gathered in the main docking area, dressed in their finest. Jake wore his dress uniform, freshly pressed. The medals on his chest felt heavier than usual. Danny stood beside him, also in dress uniform. "Ready for this?" His friend asked. "No," Jake said honestly. "But that's never stopped us before." Danny grinned. "By the way, I volunteered for the exchange program too. Figured you'd need someone to keep you out of trouble on the Viridian homeworld." Jake felt a surge of gratitude. "You're crazy. Takes one to know one." The airlock opened. Emperor Aldrich entered, flanked by guards in ceremonial armor. He was tall, even for a Viridian, and carried himself with absolute authority. His helmet was the most elaborate Jake had seen, covered in precious metals and gems that caught the light. Commander Hayes stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Emperor Aldrich, welcome to Harmony Station. Earth is honored by your presence." "The honor is mine, Commander Hayes," the Emperor replied. His voice was strong and clear. I come not as a superior, but as an equal. Not as a stranger, but as a friend. The Emperor's gaze swept the room and stopped on Jake. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, I've heard much about you. Jake stepped forward and bowed. Your Majesty, my daughter tells me you called her beautiful, the Emperor said. Jake's heart stopped. Was this a test? An accusation? But then the Emperor continued. She says it was the first time anyone had truly seen her, not just her title or her position. For that gift of recognition you have my gratitude. Relief washed over Jake. She is beautiful, Your Majesty. In courage and in spirit, the Emperor nodded. Yes, she is. And she has helped me see that my people have forgotten how to show ourselves truly. We have hidden behind protocols and traditions for so long that we forgot why we created those traditions in the first place. They were meant to protect us, not imprison us. The signing ceremony took place in the main hall. Representatives from both worlds gathered around a table where the treaty documents lay waiting. The papers were actually symbolic. The real agreement existed in digital form. But humans liked physical ceremonies. The Viridians had been kind enough to accommodate that preference. Earth's Secretary General had arrived via video link, appearing on a large screen. She and Emperor Aldrich spoke briefly, formal words about peace and cooperation and mutual respect. Then they signed, their signatures appearing on both the physical papers and the digital records. When it was done, the room erupted in applause. Humans and Viridians celebrated together, the sound filling the station. Later, after the formal reception, Jake found himself once again at the observation window. He seemed to always end up here when he needed to think. A good place for reflection, Commander Hayes said, joining him. You did well today, Lieutenant. You represented humanity better than I could have hoped. I just told the truth, ma'am. Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do. Hayes looked out at the stars. You know, when this mission started, I thought it would be about politics and strategy. About careful words and calculated gestures. I never expected it would be about something as simple as one person seeing another person for who they really are. Maybe that's all diplomacy really is, Jake said. Seeing each other clearly, Hayes smiled. You're wiser than I gave you credit for, Lieutenant. The Viridians are lucky to have you coming to their world. After Hayes left, Lyra arrived. She always seemed to know when Jake needed company. 6 months, she said. That is when you depart for my home world. 6 months, Jake agreed. Seems like both a long time and no time at all. I will be there to welcome you, Lyra said. To show you the crystal gardens I told you about. To introduce you to my family. To help you understand my world the way you helped me understand yours. I'd like that, Jake said. Though I'm a little nervous about meeting your family. Your father is intimidating enough. What are the rest of them like? Lyra laughed, a sound that Jake had come to treasure. They are people just like anyone. They will love you because you are kind, because you are honest, because you see beyond surfaces to what matters underneath. You give me too much credit. No, Lyra said firmly. I give you exactly the credit you deserve. You changed everything, Jake Morrison. One word, one moment of truth. That is all it took to bridge the gap between our worlds. Jake thought about that. Beautiful. Such a simple word, but it had carried the weight of everything he felt in that moment. Respect, wonder, gratitude, trust. It wasn't just me, he said. It was you too. Your courage, your willingness to break tradition. That mattered just as much. Then we did it together, Lyra said, echoing the words Jake had spoken weeks before. Two people from different worlds finding common ground. They stood together looking out at the vast expanse of space. Somewhere out there, two civilizations were learning to be neighbors, learning to be friends. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges and setbacks, but they had proven something important. That connection was possible. That understanding could overcome fear. Jake thought about the journey ahead. 6 months on a Viridian world, learning their language, their customs, their way of seeing the universe. It would be hard, but Lyra would be there. And Danny, and all the friends he hadn't met yet, ready for the adventure? Lyra asked as if reading his thoughts. Jake smiled. With you as a guide? Always. The stars outside the window seemed to shine a little brighter. Or maybe that was just hope, making everything look more beautiful. Either way, Jake felt ready. Ready for whatever came next. Ready to explore new worlds. Ready to build bridges between species. Ready to be part of something bigger than himself. It had all started with first contact, with nervousness and uncertainty. It had grown through crisis and courage, and now it was becoming something new, something neither humans nor Viridians had expected, not just an alliance, not just a treaty, but friendship. Real, honest, beautiful friendship, and that Jake thought was worth every risk, worth every challenge, worth everything.